Thanks for watching. So in front of you, you see a 1800s display of an old country town in South Dakota, and these persons can actually rent costumes to visit this location. So when you hear of running out of time, you think this kind of stuff doesn't exist. It actually does, maybe not on the extent that the book does. However, understand that people still placate these plays. The world outside had a floor, not quite like the shiny floor inside of the building, but solid gray with lines every 4 feet or so. And wait, further on, a little lower part of the floor was solid black and kind of tarry. Jesse had never seen anything like it. Who put floors outdoors? Jessie was so busy looking at the ground that it took her a minute to notice the rows and rows of carriages. At least they looked kind of like carriages, parked on some of the black floor. There must have been hundreds of them, some shiny red, some blue, others green or white. They gleamed in the sunshine. Jessie went closer to look at one. She heard a woman coaxing a little boy. "Come on, Jason. Get out of the car," the woman said. "Car?" Jessie repeated under her breath. The word did sound like carriage. So this was what Mom had been talking about when she said Miles Clifton had a limousine, and a limousine was a very big car. Were these limousines or just regular cars? Whatever they were, Jessie decided they were grand. She watched one turn into the driveway near her. It didn't have horses. How did it move? Honk. The noise sounded like a geese that came through Clifton in the fall and spring. Jessie turned around and saw the honk came from a car that had its nose pointed right at her. Inside, a woman sat behind a wheel looking mad. Jessie jumped out the way, then looked back as the car sped by. However, these cars worked. It seemed they did something to people in them. Why had the woman looked so mean? Jessie thought of the stories some of the other children in Clifton told about witchcraft. Was that how cars worked? But Jessie hadn't believed such stories before, and she didn't believe them now. Once the car was gone, Jessie glanced down to see where she was standing. She was relieved to find she was on a patch of grass beside a small maple tree. The grass was thicker than she was used to, but it still looked good. Whatever else had happened to the world, at least some things were familiar. The outdoor floor didn't go anywhere. But there wasn't time to relax on the grass and think about that. Jessie saw a sign that said Clifton Village Exit. Was it safe to just walk away from the tourists and all their cars? Casually, Jessie glanced around to make sure no one was watching. A few adults walked among the rows of the cars, but none seemed to notice Jessie. Good. Two men were spraying water on a startling bunch of flowers near the door, but they were facing the opposite direction. Feeling more confident, Jessie began walking towards the exit sign. She marveled that Mom's plan seemed to be working. Evidently, no one had noticed Jessie was gone. Miss Seward and the others that Mom called Clifton's men must think she was sick in bed, like Katie. Otherwise, Jessie shivered. Otherwise, there would be probably plenty of guards around, looking specifically for her. And as long as she stayed near the tourists, she'd be easy to find. Jessie walked faster, grateful for the arrow exit signs that appeared every 50 yards or so. But she stopped in her tracks when the arrow pointed her around a corner. Lined up in diagonals was about 30 enormous yellow cars. Cars so big that Paul's blacksmith shop could have fit in any of them. Jessie gawked. Was this what Mom meant when she said limousines were big cars? Were these all Miles Clifton's limousines? Jessie edged close enough to read the lettering on the side of each car. Grant County School District MSD of Martinville School Bus. The lettering didn't tell Jessie if the big cars were limousines or not, but she did recognize the word school. These must not belong to Miles Clifton. Did the school children who were tourists at Clifton Village get to ride on those? Jessie felt a stab of envy for those future. What had the chaperone called them? Teenagers. It was all Jessie could do to resist peeking in one of the windows of the school, maybe limousines. Later, she told herself, after she got help from Katie and the others, she could come back and look closely at them. But just in case, as she walked on, Jessie stirred back to try and register all the details so she could impress Andrew later. He'd be mad, anyhow, that Jessie had gotten to leave Clifton and he hadn't. Just beyond the cars in the school, maybe limousines. One more exit sign pointed down a road that disappeared into the forest. The road was wide and smooth, covered with more of the black, tarry surface. It made the new road they've just built into Clifton look ridiculously bumpy. But this road was lined with familiar split rail fences, just like the ones that surrounded Animal Pen in Clifton. Jessie climbed the fence and walked by the trees, hiding whenever she heard a car go by. Sure, no one seemed to be looking for her, but she didn't want to take any chances. Besides, she didn't want any more cars honking at her. Stumbling over roots and branches, Jessie realized she could go a lot faster on the smooth road. No, be cautious, she told herself. That wasn't like her. Hannah was the cautious one in the family. But Hannah wouldn't have been brave enough to leave Clifton. Jessie would have to pretend she had Hannah's caution and her own bravery. A twig snapped nearby and Jessie froze. Then she relaxed, hearing a squirrel chatter by an oak ahead of her. Jessie tried to remember what Ma had said about getting down to the main road. It would be a long walk, maybe a mile, if I remember the way they planned it. The road will wind around a lot, and then you'll see a highway. Jessie had looked puzzled at that. A very big road, bigger than anything you've ever seen before. There would be signs with numbers, only I can't remember. 17, 27, 37. I think it's a number like that. Turn north and walk along the road. It goes all the way to Indianapolis, but you should be able to find a phone long before you get there. A robin chirped in one of the elms, and Jessie smiled. If she had a mile or more to walk, she wasn't going to walk the whole way fretting. She didn't need to be as big as a worry wart as Hannah. She should be happy to find out they still had robins and squirrels in the 1900s. Then she laughed at herself. Of course they would. It was hard not to think of this as the future, this strange new world she just found out about. Filling fur with her laughter, Jessie took longer steps. She could do that in pants. She'd always wondered what it would be like to be a boy. This was as close as she'd get. All the boys back in Clifton, Jessie thought, would be jealous that Jessie was out in the woods instead of in school, listening to Mr. Smith yell. On nice spring days like this, Andrew and his friends began talking of playing hooky from school and going fishing in Crooked Creek. Of course, Andrew never did because he knew Paul would tan his hide. But some of the other boys' fathers actually let them. Jesse remembered Mr. Winningham saying it didn't matter. As soon as Horace learned his figuring and a little reading, he was taking him out of school anyhow. What's he need with all those names and dates? He's going to be a barrel maker for the rest of his life, same as me. Andrew had tried the same excuse on Pa, but Pa would have none of it. Doesn't matter if you're a blacksmith forever or not. Your mom thinks there's value in being educated just for the sake of being educated. She's probably right. Anyhow, you do what your mom wants, he said. Now a new thought struck Jessie. Could Pa and Mr. Whittingham have said those things just to play a role for the tourists? What if they didn't believe their own words? What did they really think? It was too confusing and scary to ponder. Jessie went back to studying the landscape around her, except for the road to her right and the long line of split rail fencing. It looked just like the woods surrounding Clifton. Jessie heard a car behind her and stepped behind a huge evergreen until it passed on. The noise zoomed by, but then it seemed to slow down. From the sound, Jessie guessed that the car had almost stopped, maybe 100 yards down the road. Then the noise picked up again and faded away. Jessie creeped from behind the tree, scratching her face on the tree's needle. She crouched beside the rail fence and looked down the road. There was a small building ahead, like the guardhouse or a sentry station that surrounded all the forts in Jesse's history book pictures. The car must have slowed down past the guardhouse. Well, she just had to go deeper into the woods and circle around the guard. Then she'd find her way back into that main road with the number name as soon as she passed the guardhouse. Proud that she thought to stay off the road all alone. Jessie crawled back to the evergreen. She was sure the guard had not seen her. Even if he'd been looking her way, she would have been hidden by the fence and the trees. Now it wouldn't be long, Jessie told herself. She moved deeper into the woods. The underbrush was denser here, and she had to shove branches and vines out of her way. She didn't care. She was almost away from Clifton, and maybe it wouldn't be far down that number name road before she'd find the thing Mom called a phone. Then Jessie saw the fence. It was huge, at least twice Jessie's height, maybe three times. It was made of some kind of metal. Even yards away, Jessie could see the intricate twist of strong metal that would take Pa years to make. And at the top, almost at a right angle from the rest of the fence, there were rows of wires full of poking barbs. Those would be sharp, Jessie realized numbly. She could probably climb the fence, but she was bound to tear her clothes. And what if, oh, no. It took Jessie only a minute to recognize the box high up in an oak by the fence. It moved without wind. Yet, unlike the one she'd seen in the haunted tree all those years ago, the one she'd been spanked for seeing, no one had bothered to paint this box the same color as Bart. It was the thing Mom called a camera. That was why there hadn't been more guards among the tourists up by Clifton. Miles Clifton wasn't worried about any Clifton residents getting this far. They couldn't climb the fence without being seen. Jessie hadn't really understood Mom's explanation of cameras, but she knew that if she started climbing the fence, guards would probably arrive even before she reached the sharp points at the top. And Jessie felt sure this wasn't the only camera. If almost every inch of Clifton was watched, so was every inch of this fence. Jessie moved forward. Yes, several trees down on the other side, another box moved soundlessly, and its glass, every eye moving right towards her. Like, subscribe to the bell, and thanks for listening. This will be my last reading for this time span. Maybe in the future I'll pick it back up.